There we go. Okay, you'd think that after all of these series that I would know to unmute myself. That's okay. Hi, everyone. We have kicked off officially here, and it's fine if anyone kind of continues to pop in. We'll just grab them as they come on in. But welcome. Thank you for coming. My name is Brooke. I work in student activities. I support student organizations kind of at large. And so this summer, we've put together the Student Org Essentials series, which this is our final one of the summer. And so this has been, I think, definitely a summer to remember for all of us, for certain. But we've been sort of having these conversations together throughout the summer as we've sort of navigated the uncertainty of things. And I think that's kind of what this summer series has been all about, kind of being able to react in live time to that sort of, ever-changing landscape of what's going on in the world around us. And particularly, I think this summer and how we're overcoming that sort of distanced format so that we can stay connected and foster that belonging in the student org community that is so important to us. So this entire series has been recorded as well. So it's being recorded today and posted to the website. So now would be a good time to go back and review previous content, or maybe share it out to some other like co-leaders of yours that you're talking to and kind of getting conversations rolling so that you can be prepared for the semester. So I will post the link to that, but the Go link is go.osu.edu/SOE, as in Student Org Essentials. And we are going to be wrapping up the series today with a conversation about recruitment. And I timed this conversation to be at the end of this series, knowing that we're really close to the beginning of the fall. It's kind of like that last kicking off point to where students are probably starting to get their teams together to start talking about that very first sort of welcome week back. We've got the involvement fair that'll be happening. Feel free to email us if you would like to have a table there. And many of you might be thinking about bringing students into your organization. And so we are gonna kind of think through that with our good friend, Kate Butler. She works in Sorority and Fraternity Life as the Associate Director, and she has been supporting student life, like this particular student life department, for over 7 years. I kind of looked at your LinkedIn, Kate. But in any space that I've shared with her, she always provides really creative and insightful input. And I just feel like I always appreciate her mind in kind of any environment that we're talking about. So I'm really excited that she was able to join us today and share some of that brain power with us. So I'm going to turn it over to Kate. I will be hanging out and I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for coming.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brooke. I appreciate being here, and thank you all for being with us today and having this important conversation about how we are finding new members for our organizations and recruiting them and bringing them in to continue the great work that we are doing as different student organizations and levels of involvement across the university. As Brooke mentioned, my primary role is I serve as the Associate Director of Sorority and Fraternity Life. So within that, obviously recruitment is heavily associated with the sorority and fraternity experience, but we know that it exists in pretty much all aspects of life, and whether it's a job search or student organizations or just finding new friends, right? They all have a lot of overlap there of making connections with people. So we're going to be talking a lot about that today, because I believe that recruitment fundamentally is about making connections with people and having interactions. This is going to be an interactive session. We are going to put you in some breakout rooms to have some smaller discussions at different points. And so we encourage you to utilize those times to share with people, get to know them, bounce ideas off of each other, and then we'll share some of those things back. I also encourage you, if you're able, especially in those breakout rooms, to turn your cameras on, because that can help with some of that connection. I know there's probably some people calling in, and maybe you're not in a setting where you're able to turn on your camera right now, but if you are, especially in those breakout sessions, I think that can help a lot with that connection. And I can also say, as someone who has been taking classes all summer, it makes you pay a lot more attention in class. So as you prepare for the fall, cameras are helpful. So yeah, we are gonna go ahead and get started. Brooke, do we have who's in the room poll? Cool. All right, so Brooke is gonna launch that poll. So just go ahead and let us know who you are, kind of what role you hold within your organization. There we go. All right. So it looks like we have a good, pretty even mix of some faculty, staff advisors, and then some members of executive boards. I'm assuming because this is based on recruitment that this is probably very heavily people who have some sort of recruitment type role or membership intake or what that looks like. So we're excited for you all to be here. So I am going to go ahead and share our presentation. Brooke, can you see that? Yeah, cool. All right. Okay, so as I mentioned, my name is Kate Butler. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and we're talking about recruitment, particularly in a digital world today. So one of the first things, this always happens to me. There we go. When we want to think about recruiting new people to our organizations, I think it's important to first, is to think about what we do here, what our organization is all about, and what we're looking for in new members. I think that oftentimes when we are thinking about bringing new people into our organizations, we skip this step. We skip the reconnection to our fundamental purpose as an organization and what new members can bring to that organization. A lot of times we're like, well, we need new members so that like we can hit 5 or 15 members that student organizations requires for registration or different levels of funding, or we need to have this many people because that's how big our executive board is, or we always have had this many people, so we just need to fill those. And we're not thinking about what actual purpose do those individuals serve in our groups. What can they contribute? How could the organization change based on who we bring into the organization? And how do we explain that to prospective members? So the first thing that we're going to have you do is have you jump into some breakout rooms and just have a conversation within your small group explaining what organization you represent, what you do within that organization, and then what in particular you're excited about for bringing in new members, or what you're looking for prospective members of your organization. So we are going to go ahead and launch those breakout rooms. All right, welcome back, everybody. Thank you for your discussions in those breakout rooms. So would someone like to share either specifically for your organization or just some of the conversations that came up in your breakout rooms, or perhaps something you learned about a different organization on campus that you weren't familiar with? So whoever wants to go first. What about somebody?
I can go.
Go ahead.
If no one else is going. Well, for us, we actually went around and introduced ourselves, so we ended up not having enough time to really talk much about recruitment. But just in general, we were all having similar goals, because even though we all came from different parts of like different areas of like organizations, we all wanted to make sure that with the new format that we all were very successful in recruiting people and being active in participation around Columbus, as well as just like in the organization.
Awesome. Great. What organization are you a member of?
I am part of Adams Angels. So another person that was part of my group is also part of Adams Angels, and we work to provide tutoring services to those that are in elementary schools and possibly middle schools that have disabilities, like mental disabilities, and to kind of we provide like one-on-one tutoring, we provide group tutoring, so that we not only allow with academic improvement, but also allow to grow a community amongst like the members of the organization, as well as like those that we're reaching out to and their families and everything. So we provide like welcoming kind of activities, as well as like tutoring services to kind of reach out that way as well.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
Would someone from the other group like to kind of explain what you all talked about, or something a little bit about your group?
Yeah, I can share. So my name is Sienna Varank. I'm the internal vice president for American Institute of Chemical Engineers. We just talked about our different backgrounds, where we came from. They were leaders of on different campuses. And so we were just talking about how we can bring new people to our organization and how we can get more people involved.
Awesome. Very cool. So hopefully, as you saw from some of that activity, it can take some practice to succinctly explain what your organization does, what you're all about, and what prospective members of your organization can expect from that experience, or what they may be looking for, or what you're looking for in those individuals. So one of the things we would always recommend is that you create and practice those kind of elevator pitch type conversations, so that when someone says, oh, what is that group about? You're not like, I don't know what my group does, right? And both of you did wonderful jobs explaining what your organizations do. But I think that oftentimes we overlook that, or especially if we're in organizations that seem to have very specific titles, we can think like, well, the title speaks for itself, right? What first comes to mind is a lot of the students I work with are involved in the National Society of Black Engineers. It's like very clear, right? Like what that organization is. But that name, although may be clear as to what the organization is, doesn't tell me anything about what the organization does or why students would want to be involved. And so you may have a very clear, like, this is who we are, but not what we do. Some groups have the opposite. Some groups have confusing names that don't make sense at all. And so thinking, or we have acronyms that we know what they mean and other people don't. So thinking about how you are explaining who you are, what you're looking for can be really important. And it doesn't always come naturally to people. And so thinking about like when you go home for a holiday, how you explain to your family what this group is, those sorts of conversations are excellent practice to give to prospective members of the organization. Another way that we get interest in our organizations is when we consider the information that we're sharing about our organizations. That's that again. Now I can't see any of you. I will figure this out. So when we want to think about how we are sharing our stories, it is important to think about where our information is held and how we're doing that. So I know some of you may have been a part of the social media session that Skylar held, I think a couple of weeks ago, but if you haven't, that can be a great resource to think about what we're sharing on social media, what we're doing there. But again, this is where that practice can come into play of thinking about what information can go in a written form, like on a website or our social media, and what information can only be shared individual to individual, and how we want to make sure we're sending a consistent message throughout our membership. So if I tell you one thing about the group, Brooke, who's also in the group, shouldn't tell you a completely different story about what we do. There should be some commonality there. So, but again, thinking about like, if I've heard of your group and I want to go find more information, can I find that information easily? Does it make sense to me? Does it tell me the full story of that? If I look at your social media, have you updated it at all recently to show me that you're still a group that exists, to know how I can get involved, those sorts of things. So in this next breakout session, I want you to talk a little bit about the different resources that your group utilizes to get information out to different people, and how you've determined what information goes where. So again, thinking about what resources you use to get information out there, and then how you've determined what bits of information goes where. And then again, we'll have you share back when you return to us. So we'll give you a few minutes to do that in breakout rooms. Is everybody back? I think. Okay, cool. All right, welcome back everyone. Sorry, I was trying to figure out how to do everything in Zoom, which also a good note, if you're gonna be presenting in Zoom, even though I have practiced and presented before, you always try to do something new and then it goes wrong in the moment. So practice 8 times. But welcome back. Thank you for talking about sharing your story. Would someone from one of the groups like to share kind of what you talked about, how you all share your stories, what you found to be helpful for you?
I can also go again if no one wants to. I know that for me, like our organization is quite a new one, and so we actually don't have any social media that's up and running at the moment. So that is something that we really wanted to work on. And when we were talking throughout our group, like I was just hearing from other people the kinds of social media that they use and how well it works, and how well it doesn't. And one of the people were talking about how they use a group me. And I just thought that was really smart, that like they were able to have more like direct and casual conversation with one another, which I think that you can't really get a lot of the times with different types of social media unless you try to send like a direct message through that to one another. So I just thought that that was kind of smart to, like, in such a big group, it's kind of intimidating sometimes to try and reach out to one another to ask about information. So I thought that was a really smart way to actually like distribute that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thinking about, while one form of social media may be great for some things, there may be another that's better for other forms of interaction. So if you need more of that conversation, are you using something like GroupMe or a way that you can message versus just sharing information out may exist better in a different format? Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Any other thoughts about how we're sharing information now or how we can be better getting information out there?
Our group, we were all advisors for student orgs. So, one of the, we're all from regional campuses as well. And one of us likes, and I think probably most of us are in this boat with regional campuses, but we want to have the student be student-led. So at the students out there, make sure that you take that leadership role. You are younger and know how social media is supposed to flow versus like, I'm a Facebook junkie and I just troll on Facebook, and I don't get, some of the others. But I do use GroupMe a lot with my campus activity board, and that is for the intimate one-on-one type of thing, but it's not really getting the information out there. Our campus in Lima, we have our marketing department has social media person who posts things out there, but it's very formal and it's very compartmentalized, and it's very much for the public and the recruiting aspect of it. So we've actually are transitioning someone's like because of the COVID, that their position is kind of like strained with not enough to do. So she's taking on the task of social media, I think, for like student orgs, and the more of the less like public, like formal. So it's going to be much more casual. So I'm hoping that is very much more effective. And she's a couple years older than some of I think she graduated maybe like 3 years ago. So she's, of the age group and all that. So it's really nice to have the student leaders take that lead on it, because I, as a faculty or staff perspective, it's not my forte. It's not something that I want to do. And I don't maneuver back and forth from my account to the CAB account and all that kind of stuff. So take the leadership role on that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that making sure that the voice of that social media is authentic to the group and demonstrating that it is a student leadership organization and a way for students to get engaged in that way. And then I think, like was mentioned, thinking of the resources that exist for you. So if there are opportunities to have someone who's an expert in social media, utilizing that. If you're a part of a larger national organization that maybe has some resources, whether it's graphics or different things, utilizing those things so that you don't always have to be creating new content yourself. But I think in general, again, when we think about sharing our stories, it's thinking about the information that people need to get and how they're getting it and how they're getting it in different ways. That there's some things that maybe just be more static, like when you're meeting or what your mission is or who your leadership is, that can live on something like a website. But you may have an event coming up that you want to be able to promote and put out there. And so maybe something like Instagram is more appropriate for that. And then thinking again, and we'll talk a little bit more about current member engagement at the end, but how are you also keeping everybody within the group up to date and on top of things? So yeah, a lot of different things we can do. So as we move forward, we've talked about sharing our story, and then it is really about how we are making connections. Of course, this is going to happen again, even though it was clicking so many times before, how we are making connections to specific individuals. So when we think about bringing new people into our organizations, or you think about a time in your life that you have joined a new organization, oftentimes you may find information and say, that group seems interesting. I seem to connect with that purpose, but you never really fully commit to joining until you meet a person in that group, that you need to know, like, these people live what they say their organization's about. They seem like fun people to be around. I want to spend time with them. If I'm going to take on a leadership role, these seem like people I can count on and depend on, those sorts of things. And those things all really start with human connection. And I think oftentimes when we think of recruitment for student organizations, we think of leading with the group, but in reality, leading with the person and that personal connection can be even more important. And I think particularly this year, when we consider how students are coming to college for the first time in this bizarre environment where they can't just maybe sit in a large gathering in a common area of a residence hall or in a union type space and gather and just get to know people in that way. It's going to be different. If you think about your classes, that normally you would go to class in the 5 minutes that you're there before class, hopefully you are speaking to other humans and saying hello and making those connections. That sort of stuff can happen on Zoom, but it can require a little bit more intentionality there to reach out and have those individualized conversations. And so those are some of the things we're going to talk about. I am going to pop a resource in the chat that was specifically created for the sorority and fraternity context. So if you read some of the things in there and you're like, this is clearly for a sorority, use your extrapolation to see how it can exist for a lot of different places. But what that resource does is it provides kind of like opening messages via a lot of social media type formats to connect with people. And some of them, it's connecting with a new person. Some of it, it's you've met this person before, so maybe you engaged with them at the involvement fair, and then you want to reconnect with them. So it gives you a lot of different things there. What I will say is there's a lot of great ways to utilize this sort of opening line type mentality in a Zoom type setting. So they really focus on direct messaging someone on Instagram or something like that, which is totally viable. But thinking about the main way that you are potentially going to meet people this year is in your Zoom type classes or hybrid classes or whatever. And so how do you use some of these things that when someone says something really thoughtful in class, you use the private message feature in Zoom and you say that was really thoughtful. I would love to talk to you more about that. Or you notice that they are contributing a lot and you want to thank them for doing that. Or you just say hello to someone, right? You've been in breakout rooms with someone and you're starting to build a connection and you're just like, hey, great to see you. Hope you're having a great day, right? There's a lot of ways to create those personal connections using the technology, knowing that it's going to feel a little bit different. And it's going to look a little bit differently too. So we are gonna do another breakout. And what I want you to think about this time is, I gave you an example of how you may reach out via Zoom, of just that, other reasons why you may reach out to someone, and think about all the different ways that you can make that personal connection with people, even if you're not in the same physical space with them. Does that make sense? Cool. All right, so we are going to send you to breakout rooms again.
All right. Hi, everyone. So Kate ended up having horrendous technical difficulties where her computer shut down and then she was furiously typing an email and then it let her back in and then it kicked her back out again, all the drama unfolding while you were in the breakout room. So be able to join us here in the last 15 minutes, but we were able in the in-between moment, she's like, this is what I was going to talk about next, and before she disappeared into the void. So I think it's okay. I think we're able to continue this conversation with us as a team and kind of fill in some, the rest of our time together, just kind of like large group talking it out. But I think, could we start by sharing some of the things that you were talking about in your group? So who would like to share what you were discussing?
I can start.
Cool.
So I'm Denise. I'm a college success counselor at ATI and in Worcester, and I am the advisor for Manners, which is minorities in agricultural, natural resources, and related sciences. It's a professional development organization for underrepresented students. One of the ideas that popped into my head as Kate was talking was this idea of maybe pairing up students who are returning with new students. I was kind of thinking in terms of like what I imagine. I was never in Greek life, but what I imagine, that there are bigs and littles and stuff like that in Greek life. Maybe not so formal as that, but just to have someone that can reach out to that person and say, hey, you came to, our presentation or whatever it's going to be for the resource fair. I'd love to talk to you more about the organization, the great things we have planned, and also I'd like to be there as a resource for you, and give them sort of some talking points. And when I was talking with Amy and Karen, Karen came up with some good points about, the sticky wicket of texting students and whether they respond and things like that. And so that maybe working into the resource fair or the involvement fair is to have them, give us their phone number and ask for permission to be texted so that, we're not reaching out and making them feel uncomfortable, how we get these random texts and stuff. So, and I was also thinking of providing the current students with some talking points so that they don't feel uncomfortable approaching someone they don't know. So anyone else who tries it, let me know. I'm going to try it. We can talk back and see what happens.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Sorry, everyone, for my terrible internet. Today's just one of those days, I guess. But I think that idea of kind of giving some individual members some ownership over you're the person who's going to reach out to this person can help a lot. I think oftentimes in organizations, especially if there is one person who's deemed like the recruitment or the membership chair or whatever, everyone thinks like, well, it's entirely your job to do this. And it is not. It needs to be the entire group of people who take some ownership of welcoming new people and demonstrate to the prospective members, like, we want you to be here, and not just this one person wants you to be here. We all want you to be here, and we want to do that. I think the communication piece, it is ever evolving, the way people want to be communicated with and what they're going to respond to. And so sometimes it's just figuring out for that person, like, what it is, having that conversation. I can tell you right now, it's certainly not email. So just figuring out what that best point of communication is. Were there I don't know how many people got a chance to share. So other thoughts about communication, how we're making those connections with people?
I can talk about something that I mentioned. I was just saying how we usually, when we're in person, we engage our members at the first meeting where we have quite a bit of people by breaking them off into groups and trying to make them decide between like two options, something like pop culture, something like that. So it's usually like an entire room of like 100 people like arguing about which singer they like better, something like that, and then they have to come to consensus before we like all come back. So we're thinking of just doing like that same kind of thing for our first meeting, but through Zoom breakout rooms. Hopefully we can get them as small as possible. We're not sure like how many people plan to show up, but just so that people can meet others on like a more individual scale. And we're gonna, we also plan to do that kind of individual meetup thing. So we're all sending our e-board members out to talk to like these few freshmen, and we're kind of like assigning them to like unofficially to make sure that they feel welcome, to DM them and group me if they need help, things like that.
Awesome. Yeah, I think thinking about if there are things you still want to do in large group settings, how are we using different technologies to make them feel more intimate? So breakout rooms are a great way to do that. And you can make them as big or small as you want to kind of spur those conversations. So encouraging that. And then I think also like people are able to do stuff in person as they are comfortable and following medical guidelines, right? And so if people want to go for a walk around campus with their masks on to get to know each other, they can do that, right? If they want to have socially distant coffee, they can do that. And so reminding people that this doesn't mean that your entire life is trapped in a single room and never seeing anyone face to face, that you should be interacting with people and getting to know them. And that means going outside, right? That it like, as you are comfortable and as you are able, obviously based on your individual circumstances, but that we shouldn't be completely negating those opportunities. And while it may seem more time consuming to have those very specific one-on-one interactions, those ultimately create those stronger connections. So I think it's awesome that you mentioned that and just different things that you can do there. So just in the interest of time, we're just going to move on to kind of the last real point before we're able to talk through any questions or lingering concerns that you all have. And that is to not forget about the members that are currently members of organizations. I think at this time of year, we can get very caught up in new and exciting and welcoming, which is all wonderful. But the reality is all of our organizations have individuals who have already dedicated their time and energies to our organizations and want to continue to feel valued in those ways. And knowing that, again, the way they were used to reconnecting with people may not exist for them this year. So you might not get to have your big welcome back in-person meeting or do those sorts of things. And so how are we connecting with individuals and recognizing the highs and lows that students are going to face throughout the fall semester and being there for them through those things? And so are you working with the executive board to say, okay, we haven't seen Susie in 2 weeks. Like, has anyone heard from her? What's going on? How are we going to reach out in a caring way? Because maybe like final or midterms are happening, or it's just getting stressful, or the weather has been crappy and no one wants to go outside, or whatever it is, and realizing that that's going to hit people at different times. And we want to be there to still connect with people and reach out to them. I think the other piece of that is we want to be purposeful in all the interactions that we're having, knowing that a lot of our time is going to be spent in spaces like this, staring at people in little boxes. It can get exhausting. It can be burdensome, especially if you're not sure why you're there. If you haven't had the opportunity yet to sit in a Zoom meeting where you're like, what am I doing here? Hopefully that never happens, but it probably will. And so thinking about with your organization, how are you being purposeful and being upfront about that purpose? So it is okay to do a mix of things that are very business oriented and some fun things, but being clear about that so that if someone needs some personal time and it's going to be the fun meeting, they can make that judgment call for themselves, and they're not sitting there when it's supposed to be fun thinking, I should be doing homework right now, or I could be doing this, or I just want to be outside. They can make those independent decisions for themselves. And so I think having that purpose, whether it is fun or business, and then just being clear for people about what you're expecting, what that time actually is. If something only needs to be a 15 or 30-minute meeting, just make it that. We don't have to have all hour-long meetings. Over Zoom, things should certainly not be more than an hour most of the time. So I know with a lot of our groups, we've talked about what can people do on their own time that we can then discuss when we get together. So we're being as purposeful as possible and valuing people's time and energies when we are together. So don't forget about those people who have already given a lot to your organizations. What what lingering questions or concerns are out there from people that we can help talk through in the time that we have left?
I do have a question. The breakout rooms, I only do breakout rooms on these sessions. So are they like when you randomly, do you randomly just pick the breakout rooms? Because I think I have a meeting on Tuesday with my CAB group, and I would like to do a breakout room with them for like maybe an icebreaker type thing. So what are some options? Like I can do a poll. I know that there's polling and stuff, but what are some, give me the 411 on the breakout rooms, because I'm thinking it's a really good icebreaker type thing.
Yeah,
for you guys.
Great question. So yes, you can do the polls. So, and Brooke, correct me if I'm wrong, because you've done more of these, I think, in these, but you can preload some questions into the polls and share them at different times. And then for the breakout rooms, you can either assign them or do random. I know with the random, if there's certain people you want to go, like, so if you want the executive board to all be in different rooms, like you have to kind of manually override some of those things. What I would always recommend is that you give at least 2 people host or co-host power, because it can be a little challenging to do, like to be talking and giving people prompts while you're setting up. So you saw today, like Brooke was setting up the breakout rooms while I was talking, because clearly I had enough going on myself. So I think that can be really helpful. And hosts can also jump from room to room. So if you want to be able to sit in and listen as breakout rooms are happening, you can do that there. And then you can change them up. So you can be with these people and then be with different people, or you can keep them the same. Brooke, is there anything that I missed with that?
No, I think you got it pretty well. And I'm happy like offline to do like some one-on-one walkthroughs of using any of these tools, and I can share and like we can talk through some of the steps if you wanted to practice some of that. I'm happy to, like with anyone here, to talk through some of that stuff with you, because like while I can't screen share the Zoom functions, we could like walk through it together and you could set it up on your end and I could like verbally sort of affirm what it is that you're doing. Because a lot of these like Zoom controls, when you're the host, sort of float on top of the screen, and they're supposed to not be visible to the people who are looking at your screen material. And so, but yeah, I think the polls I really love, because it's in a large group setting. It's a great way to get some level of engagement from people who might not feel comfortable sort of participating in this is me and this is what I want to share right now. And I'd like to vary some of the engagement options so that you can sort of meet people where they're at with these spaces. So the polls are great. The breakouts are great for that purpose as well. And then of course, inviting large shareouts is also like a healthy way of trying to sort of stagger what it is that you're doing to invite people to participate in ways that make sense for them. I think that's kind of like the big benefit I see to some of these features in Zoom specifically.
Okay, so students have the option or can be hosts, and they can set up their own Zoom meetings and so forth. It's not just like faculty and staff. Okay, I wanted to make sure that they knew that. My students need to learn that.
And I think the university has published some really good sort of walkthroughs on how to use some of these tools specifically. So I can kind of fish for that link as we're wrapping up here, and I can post that in the chat. So for those of you who would like more of like an instructional guide, I can find that for us. Oh, she's frozen. Okay, that's okay. So this would be like a great time to sort of put out some final thoughts. If anyone has any extra sort of lingering questions or maybe challenges that they're going to be facing that they're coming in the upcoming school year. Some of the kind of like wrap up items that I was thinking about as we were sort of talking through this concept of retention, and maybe sort of leveraging, okay, who do we have that we need to keep and sustain? And I think maybe even right now, it's even more important than ever to be doing that outreach to your members who are coming back, because, you know, there is this opportunity, of course, to bring in new people, but if you're like sort of hemorrhaging people as they're coming back into school, or as we're going through some sort of campus transition, it's often sort of that time where you see that attrition or that like retreating of people into their spaces. And so a lot of those relationship building things that we talked through won't be able to effectively happen if you don't have current people to sort of help make those connections and make that happen. So I think like a lot of the logic there sort of applies when you're thinking about how it is you're going to focus and make some goals as you're entering the school year. And then the other thing I thought about was sort of like the maybe more tangible or tasky thing of maybe as a leadership team coming up with like, what is our goal here? Like, what is our recruitment goal? Like, let's talk about numbers for a minute. You know, maybe, and I think Kate kind of mentioned this at the beginning where she was talking about like sort of attention that people have when they look at recruitment, like just for the sake of it, we want new people. But realistically, your group can do a lot with a really reasonable and even small number of people. So you're going to have to kind of leverage, like, do we want to do something that's enormous where we need a lot of people? Like maybe we have programs that we have to facilitate and we really need to keep that up. And even then, if you're struggling with some of the recruitment aspect of things, can you buddy up with another student org to get those numbers up in that way for that sort of purpose of your organization? But I think like a lot of your value, and I think the big message that Kate was talking about was making that connection. And so you can do that in a small scale in a way that's way more enriching for you and the people in your org than it would be to just bring on people without a lot behind that. And I think the last sort of main thing is that sort of like the timing of this conversation was also built around the fact that like, you need to sort of establish some of those other foundational things before you're bringing people in. So I think about the sort of prioritization that you're having, like we need to know what it is we're going to be doing and how we're going to be doing it and sort of having that roadmap laid out for us so that when we bring people in and that when we talk about our organization, we can get them excited about that. We have intention and purpose that is attractive to people, especially in a time of uncertainty. Like, oh, this is what this group is doing. This makes me feel good, like they've got it under control. And you don't want to feel like there's not a purpose behind your gathering as well. I know we kind of hit on that. And in our previous session, we talked about sort of like the gathering and what's behind that and why. So you never want to gather without a purpose. And so I think that a lot of that sort of stems down to some of these like checkpoints you're going to want to make as a team before you go all in on like, let's bring in the people. We want to make sure that our foundations are set. So what else you got? What are your concerns? What are your challenges? What are your sort of final remarks, things that you're looking forward to?
One of my fears is making sure that we don't just recruit anybody just because they kind of are interested, just because wow, that might be effective for this year. In the future, when hopefully like this all passes, we don't want to kind of screw over the org in years to come. So just making sure we're not just kind of wanting anyone who breathes, and like we're really looking for people who are interested and they want to contribute.
Yeah, I think that's really valid in that I think it also kind of depends on the nature of your org and sort of like the structure of your membership, what it is that experience is like. I think that kind of goes back to one of our earlier breakouts where like, what is it that you want in your members? Who are you looking for? Who can you sort of be like, these are the people that we want? And maybe you even start to notice some patterns in your membership that you've had over the years. Like maybe you consistently have a lot of like public policy majors and you find that like their classes are really aligning with a lot of the discussion and things that are happening in your organization. So is that going to be like a priority item for you to be like, well, if that's a pattern that we're noticing, maybe that's something that we're doing really well and we want to keep, bringing in those groups, or maybe we want to make sure that we're really diversifying the academic backgrounds of people coming into our organization. And we want to do some reflection on why it is that we're bringing in people within a specific sort of niche of campus, so to speak. But yeah, I think like in your comment about we don't want to screw over future members in the organization, like, are you sort of talking about some of that like commitment aspect of it? Like, what's behind that part?
So I guess I'm kind of here almost representing two orgs. I'm the recruitment chair of Delta Mega Kappa, which is a pre-health sorority. And like member numbers are pretty important in the sorority setting. So making sure like in the next years to come, there's enough people to run for exec or, you know, get a big little pairing is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other org that I'm in is TEDx Ohio State University, which brings like the big scale TED Talks kind of to campus. And our like kind of challenge right now is making sure, because a lot of us when we graduate won't be here, that are on exec, and kind of helping the younger people navigate out of it, and making sure, because we put on like a signature event each year, and making sure they're equipped and ready to tackle that, even if that's not something that will look how it traditionally looks this year.
Yeah, that's like the big fear, right? That like you've put so much time and effort and like your soul into this organization, and then you know that you have to leave, and then you're like, okay, so are they going to be able to coast without us? Like, what are we going to do? Especially if you have a large chunk of your team that's sort of departing at a same time. I think that's another logistical thing to consider when you're setting up your leadership team, maybe even at the beginning of the year, to be like, okay, everyone, let's talk through like this item of how many of us are sort of planning on graduating at the end of this academic year, and how does that change how it is that we're sort of creating that pipeline to leadership in our organization. At what time do we need to have these conversations with our members so that they know to expect, like, this is something we want for you. There are going to be a lot of opportunities at the end of this year for you to really step up, and we're looking for people to do that. Yeah, and I think like your organizations specifically definitely those people. So that's part of that numbers game of like, what's our goal? Like, what's our optimum size? And when are we going to feel like we're successful? Like, when are we going to feel like we've met that goal? So maybe we even have a couple of benchmarks, right? Where you're like, okay, at a minimum, this is what we need to function right now. So how are we going to prioritize reaching that? And then we're going to like shoot for the moon at this number. We're going to feel like we really have the people that we need, or maybe this is our max capacity. Maybe there's even a kind of a buffer zone there. So yeah, I think you're going to have some like smart strategic conversation about like, what are your size goals? For sure. Any other like lingering like next sort of action steps or conversation that you're going to be wanting to have after today that you're going to take out with you as you're planning for the start of the fall? I can hear I don't know if you can hear it, my clock is ticking in the background.